Pam had a one-way ticket.
Sink or swim. This is my craft and I want to learn all of it.
Those people had a job and you were trying to build a career.
Natural enthusiasm for what you do is infectious. She's not a salesperson, she's a human.
You can't fake caring about people.
Do all the things, read the books, listen to the podcast, don't get complacent.
That's how you crush it. Welcome everybody to episode 4 of the How They Crushed It podcast, sponsored by Direct Mortgage Loans where I work. We have a tremendous guest today, longtime friend of mine, longtime colleague Pam Vroman, who does crush it, has crushed it for a long time, and is just a tremendous industry leader in our industry. She's a tremendous business partner. Everybody knows Pam. Everybody loves Pam. She's crushed it in a lot of ways. She continues to crush it, and I know she's going to have a lot of great nuggets for us here today. Welcome everybody to episode 4 of the How They Crushed It podcast, sponsored by Direct Mortgage Loans where I work and this wonderful woman works. My guest today is Pam Vroman, who I've known for about 15 years and I'm fortunate enough to work with again. Pam has a great story. Pam does actually crush it in a lot of meaningful ways, and I'm pumped to talk to her. Her energy is awesome. So we're going to get into a lot of great stuff today. Pam, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here and share a little bit about what I do, my story, and who I am.
Cool. And you have watched the other podcast up to this point?
Yes, I have, which was amazing. It was inspiring to me. Being in sales, keeping your head in the game. I've really enjoyed it. I thought it was awesome. So I'm very excited to see these all play out.
And the audience knows you could be a harsh critic, so thank you for the compliments. I'm pumped. I didn't get beat up about this so far, the first couple of episodes.
You are amazing. You're crushing it.
Oh, crushing it, everybody. So anyway, Pam, we always start off with a little fun segment, the most Googled questions. Our crack marketing staff at DML comes up with some funny ones, and we don't tell Pam these ahead of time. So, and there's some people off camera that might throw in some other ones if we have some fun. But number one, this time of year, most Googled question, where's my tax refund?
Whew. Well, for me, there is no refund.
That means she's crushed it and had a good year if she owes money. It's a good answer. Who these days is the most Googled person?
Taylor Swift?
Yeah.
Kind of has to be. Yeah.
It?
Pains me to say it. So when this airs, by the way, and while we're recording, everybody, the Ravens have already lost to Taylor Swift. Notice I say they didn't lose to the Chiefs. The Ravens in Baltimore lost to Taylor Swift. So
I'm curious to see, is her boyfriend second? So they now call him Taylor Swift's boyfriend, as well my daughter and her friends call him.
See, Pam has how old's your daughter?
12.
Yeah, so is she a Swiftie?
She's growing into one, so her friends are. So I think it's slowly progressing where she's not quite one yet, but I'm sure she would take some Taylor Swift tickets.
I am not a Swiftie. My one son is a Swiftie and told me, you know him really well, Nathan. He told me, Dad, get on the right side of history.
Oh,
that was his Swiftie comment. Yeah, you can talk to him about that when you get back to the office today.
I will definitely have to. She is pretty amazing. So it's a gang.
You're gonna laugh at this one. The most Googled question, who am I?
Who are you, Dean Johnson?
Or who am I, Pam? I don't know. It was written for me.
That's a Googled question.
That's a most Googled question.
I'd love to see the Google responses.
So maybe that's a perfect segue today into who am I, because let's talk a little bit about your Pam's story. You know, we always start this segment. We have 4 segments. I didn't say this earlier, everybody, but we always do. We start out with the crushing it, asking questions. We talk about Pam's story and how she got into business and you know her evolution there. We talk about Pam's sales and marketing story, like what's happened to build this business. And lastly, we always end with, what are you doing today? Not in the past. We'll have talked about your story. We're going to talk about maybe what you might do in the future, but what you're doing right now today in February of 2024 to be successful, remain successful, and keep your business thriving. So with that said, where did you grow up? Tell us the Pam story. Let's start with little Pam, and let's evolve into Pam, the business tycoon these days.
Okay, so little Pam is from a small town in upstate New York. Just outside of Binghamton, New York, if you're familiar with that area. So,
I'm familiar with the name. I don't know that I've spent much time in Binghamton.
Yeah, a lot of people just have driven past, maybe on their way to Syracuse or Buffalo. So humble beginnings. I did not grow up with money. Moved to Maryland. One of my best friends went to Towson University, and she was like, hey, why don't you come down to Maryland and join me? So
how old were you here?
19.
Okay.
My junior year in high school, my dad had to stop working because he had 2 heart attacks in one day. So that kind of changed our family dynamics financially. So when I left from upstate New York, I still remember my dad, I think he was on the porch probably waving to me for like an hour, but I left with probably like $600 in my pocket. And no way to like turn back and be like, oh, my car broke down. Like, there's no way to turn to my family. In fact,
like they say in the airline, like a one-way ticket.
Yes, that's right. It's like
Pam had a one-way ticket.
Sink or swim. So I moved to Maryland with my girlfriend, and she's going to college at Towson, and stayed with her for about a few weeks. And she was soon like, okay, you're gonna have to get your own place. So I got my own apartment, which was I'm waitressing. $600 to my name to get an apartment, do all these things that I'm so
show up in town, find a place, find a job. Did you have a job before you got here?
I did not. So I got a job, if anyone in the Baltimore area knows of Valentino's. So it's a restaurant that a lot of people go to, kind of late night, cafe, diner style.
Familiar.
So I worked there, and quickly they were like, go down to Little Italy, dress up. This is more upscale restaurant. You'll probably make more money if you. So one of the older ladies was like, go down there. I think you'll do better there. So I think it was like a week later, my car broke down, and it was like $1,200 to fix the car. And I've got $600. So this is when the grit and grind, I think, started to be like, wow, the real world is hitting me. So I started working double shifts. I did land a job in Little Italy, which was my first taste at like fine dining. And then eventually next after that, got a job at Ruth's Chris. That was
which is really fine dining.
And that Ruth's Chris at the time was very upscale for Baltimore. It was like the place.
So you're 19 or 20 at this point?
Correct. Yeah. So
just a year out of Binghamton, New York.
That's right.
$600. I got it.
Yeah.
You've already said grit and grind, which I love. Grit and grind, everybody. That's at every stage of life.
Yes. So Ruth's Chris was very much the restaurant in Baltimore at the time. The Havana Club was above it. My girlfriend told me to cut my hair and learn about wine. Now, mind you, I'm not even old enough to drink wine, and they have tastings at like 10 a.m. at the restaurant. So I landed the job there, which was huge.
Hold on, your hair looks good right now. What was wrong with the hair back then?
Remember that haircut? We'll have to flash a picture of that haircut.
I'll find it.
But that was to make me look older so that I could land the job. Back then at Ruth's Chris, they barely hired women, let alone a woman who was not even old enough to drink wine. So getting this job was pretty huge. So did really well there, made great money. At that time, the economy was booming, so the restaurant business was also booming. A few years into that, a girlfriend of mine was like, hey, if you want to, transition out of the restaurant industry, I'm working in mortgages. This was before 9/11. And the refi boom had begun. So my girlfriend was like, why don't you come and see if you would be interested in being my assistant? Well, by day number 2, I was like, oh my God, I love this. I love people. I love sales. I didn't even know that I loved sales. I mean, in the restaurant industry, you are selling
That's
wine.
what I was going to say. Time out. Ruth's Chris for a 20-year-old from a small town, was that culture shock?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, you're seeing, baseball players, football players, come in. I remember anytime I would have to carry a martini to a table, I was like so intimidated because I was so nervous that I would drop it on the business person that I was serving it to. So my girlfriend had me interview, and by day number 2, even at that mortgage company, they were like, we think you should be a loan officer. So right from there, I was never her assistant. I just fell into mortgages that way. So from there, I just completely fell in love with it. We did business in all states, so I could work until 10 o'clock at night because of the time difference. So I could call Alaska. So I just became completely infatuated with it and soon left Ruth's Chris. So when I started, I was doing both, but soon after.
So real grit and grind at that point.
Correct. Yep. And I think like 7 to 8 months into it, 9/11 happened and interest rates plummeted. So the refi boom sped up.
I'm familiar. I got the gray hairs, Pam, that have not been cut. So I was around back then.
Yes. So the industry picked up even more. And the funny thing is, I remember when I was working at the restaurant and I interviewed to work in the mortgage industry, people that I was working with said, the refi boom is over. You're not going to want to get into that industry. That's drying up. There's no money to be made there. And now I'm like, 23 years later, I'm like, well, a
little bit of money was made in there.
Yeah. So, so completely fell in love with it. I would, work my tail off.
So hold on, let's talk. You just came out of being a waitress. You're green. So you fell in love with it, but you're green. You're new.
Yes.
You're not from here. You didn't have a big network.
Right.
Talk to me about what you were doing. I mean, what you were doing. How were you generating business? And, what skills did you bring from the waitressing or from anywhere else to like push you there, other than obviously you're a confident woman and I can see that, but were you this confident back then?
Definitely not. In fact, I was so young that my voice sounded so young. So I remember feeling like I was getting little girled sometimes on the phone. But, I think repetition brings confidence. And so when I started off, the way that you started as a rookie loan officer is what we would call TUDs, so turned us down. Those were the leads that senior loan officers had already spoken to that said, I'm not interested in refinancing, no thank you. So I remember a friend of mine, loan officer, after working with him for several years, when I first started, I would take the box under his desk and just pull the leads out from there and call through them. So they would not give the new loan officers fresh leads. You would just get these TUDs. So off of the TUDs, I was crushing it off of those TUDs. So then eventually, I worked my way into getting fresh leads. And, I would work Saturdays like every single week, just worked my tail off.
Has everybody heard this out there? 2 jobs, no chance to turn herself back, working, Saturdays, working Sundays. That's how you, for youngsters listening in any industry, it's how you do it.
That's right. Yep. So I would pull out a lead sheet every day and I would make 50 calls a day was my goal. And if I didn't do that 5 days a week, it would roll over to whatever I missed on Saturday. Like, okay, so let's say I called 30 on Thursday. That means I have 20 to make on Saturday. So just kept grinding it out like that. And yeah, it just killed it. And then I started to kind of branch out into different avenues of the business. So at that time, people were just doing refis. And I was like, I want to try to learn about renovation loans and construction loans and purchase transactions. And everyone's like, you don't want to dive into that. This is the low-hanging fruit. But I wanted to really learn about all of it.
God bless you, because those people had a job and you were trying to build a career.
Yeah, and the thing that I'm like, wow, that was kind of innovative thinking back because I was so young, is that no one else was doing that and no one told me to do that. I was just like, I just want to learn how to do all of it. Like, this is my craft and I want to learn all of it. So, and that ended up really working out well years later when the rates went up, that I knew how to do all these different kind of loans. And I'm still that way now. People back then were like, do you really want to waste your time on a construction loan or a renovation loan? And I'm like, yeah, I want to know how to do the difficult stuff so that you have like a bigger book of business, basically.
Build a career, everybody. Ask questions, learn more. I mean, that's what we preach internally all the time.
Yeah, and not stay in just a box of what everyone else is doing. So kudos to that 25-year-old Pam that was like, well, what about that? Because no one else was doing that. So. And
not only were they not doing it, they were telling you, don't worry. Some of your colleagues telling you not to do it.
Correct. Yes. So I was like, well, why not? Like, let's just try that. Let me just get my own opinion versus what you think it's like.
Oh, I love that. Your own opinion. Yeah. That's how you crush it. See, that was pretty good, guys. Anyway, so let's transition a little bit into sales and marketing, and it can be, we can go back there, we can talk now. And this podcast is for people that in any industry, that's why we're trying to zero in on things, that can help anybody be successful. I love that you said repetition brings confidence. Talk about that from a sales and marketing perspective as you're, throughout these last 20 years. What things were you doing back then that, are there some things you were doing back then that you're still doing now?
Discipline. So every day being very disciplined, has probably been one of the biggest parts of my success, I would say, being very disciplined.
Daily discipline. I'm writing that one down.
Also staying really positive in any sales job, no matter what you're selling. I think that energy and that natural enthusiasm for what you do is infectious. People love that. People want to work with people that love what they do. So I think people can tell, like, oh, Pam really loves this. Like, I want to work with her because she's excited to take my call because she loves what she's doing. People will call me at like 9 o'clock at night and they're like, sorry to bother you. I'm like, that's like telling a Major League Baseball pitcher, sorry for having you at, up there on the mound. It's like, I love this. You're calling me, and I don't go to work every day going to a job. It's something that I'm passionate about, and,
Well, you and I have talked in the past, positivity and enthusiasm are not exactly the same thing. They're cousins and they're similar, but you need to be positive and you need to show enthusiasm about it. You clearly, just your energy sitting here, you've got enthusiasm about what
Yes.
you do, and you've been doing it 20 some years and you haven't lost that.
Yeah. Yeah, and in sales, I mean, sales can be tricky. These last few years have been tricky, but to keep that enthusiasm and find the wins, I feel like is huge. So activity, bringing the wins, which then propels you, is I think is big for me.
That's wonderful. That transition from dialing on leads to building a relationship. You're not from the town in which you work, so you didn't have like a childhood network of people that are now in the industry. Talk to me about how you started building these, because I know that from working with you, you have a lot of long-term relationships. You have a lot of relationships out there in the market now. How did you build those, maintain those, and how did you go from this waitress who was calling leads with a headset to someone who now has a big, network and database and tons of relationships?
So organically, those relationships grew. So when I would close loans, I would reach out to the listing agent on those sides, and then just servicing them and doing whatever it takes. I think that they know Pam's got this. I'm going to give this to Pam because then I don't have to worry about this. Pam's going to take care of my clients. That service and being, just totally on top of every single part of every aspect of the transaction brings those long-term relationships. People know her service is impeccable. She's on top of it. And her team is impeccable. So now my career is at the point where I have an amazing team, and that's huge for me. Having that support of people that care about our clients as much as I do, are creative and kill it, just are on top of every aspect of it.
Well, let me ask though, because you've talked a lot about being positive, being enthusiastic, which I love that, and I know that it's genuine with you. As you build a team, and this is for people out there, as you're building a business and hiring, are you trying to find people is that part of your hiring process, that this person's going to be as passionate, as enthusiastic as I am? Talk a little bit about that.
Yes, that is how we all vibe. They know how I am, and they're running alongside me. So they have to kind of be in that same vein, and thank goodness they are. So absolutely, when we've hired people and it wasn't the right fit and they didn't have that same passion, you could feel it and it didn't align.
And it's never going to work out.
That's right. Yeah. So hiring the right people is so huge when you grow.
Well, that's good. Everybody hear that. You don't always, by the way, that doesn't mean you have to hire people that have the same exact skill set as you.
Correct.
They just have to have the same passion, enthusiasm, and positivity that you do.
That's right. So my branch ops person, she is one of the most detailed people out there. Her strengths are the opposite of mine. If you sent her out to do marketing, she would just be so uncomfortable, just hate life, But you put her behind a stack of tax returns with very difficult, intricate parts of a file, those details she sucks up and loves.
But is she as passionate about it as you are?
She is. Yep, absolutely. She is as passionate. Yep.
Cool.
Yeah.
And I know, and you've got some younger people in your team that you're teaching the next wave because you're at that point in your career. How do you go about teaching somebody after you have such a wonderful story from zero to now this thriving business? How do you teach that next generation to have that same, grit and grind that you had?
So I think lead by example. So just like my children, they don't do as I say, they do as I am doing. So leading by example. I also think it's naturally in a lot of people. So that's when you're hiring and finding the right people for your team. A lot of it is just in them.
I agree, but kudos to you. Pam, you see it and pull it out.
Yes.
If it's in there, sometimes you can miss it, or you can misevaluate.
Right, and encourage it. It's like, oh, that was great what you said right there. That was great. They will feel that you care about them. Like, complimenting them on those strengths so that they continue to pull that out of them is huge.
You can't fake caring about people. Is that a good?
That's right. Absolutely. So I am definitely always client-centric. So clients come first, and if you keep that at the top of your mindset every day, business will just come because they're going to feel that. So, you don't necessarily have to even sell yourself when they know you care about them. So,
and we've talked a lot about this in a separate session, being authentic, you being authentic.
Right, yes. Yeah.
You can't fake that.
Absolutely. And going the extra mile for people, reaching out to them after the transaction is done, whatever industry you're in, not being transactional, those follow-ups afterwards are huge. And that's what creates that network, gaining referrals, gaining great partnerships is after the transaction.
Let me ask you something, going all the way back to you at Ruth's Chris, did you find you were at your most successful there when you were your most authentic self?
Absolutely, yeah. Getting to know the customers on on that kind of being yourself, being down to earth with them. As I get older, I'm finding that being vulnerable is actually a superpower. That's something that was really tricky for me, but I'm like, wow, as you're more yourself, people are like, oh, she's not a salesperson, she's a human, and they want to connect with the real human you. So whatever you're maybe working on or pushing through, if you share that with people, they're like, oh man, I've been trying to dive into that myself.
I think that's the most powerful thing you've said, being your most authentic self. People want to work with those types of people. They just do in any industry.
That's right. Yeah, I agree.
That's great. That's great. I always like to ask, we might have touched on some of this, but what are some of the biggest lessons you think you've learned over the years? That have made, maybe you've shifted, maybe you've, said, I'm not going to do that anymore, I'm going to do more of that. What are some of the Pamisms that you think you've accumulated over the year?
Okay, awesome. So I love that question. So I would say hiring the right people. So hire slow, and they say fire fast, and I do agree with that. So sometimes in my career, I've care about people so much that I've kept people on my team sometimes for too long, where that was probably not always the right move.
It hurts to fire people, everybody, but you're helping them actually. If they're not going to work out and it's clear, you're helping them. As long as you're open and honest with them about how you do it, you're helping them.
Right, exactly. And when I did have to let people go, which has been rare in my career, thank God, I think they were happy to move on. Maybe it wasn't the right job fit. And, you leave on good terms, you wish them well, and every job is not for every person. So I do feel like when I did have to, they were like, well, thank you for the opportunity, and, we parted as friends. So
for those that haven't heard out there, hire slow, fire quick, fire fast. That's in a lot of management books.
Yeah. So the other things in the last few years that I've really gained from this past year, as you know, I had a coach, and I really got a lot out of that. Just like anything in life, I think a coach is huge. Like I need a coach at the gym to get my butt in shape. Having a coach for my business was absolutely huge for me. Someone that could see not necessarily what I was doing wrong, but where I could improve from that overview.
I love it.
Was absolutely huge. And I want to have a coach now forever.
Pam, I've had a coach for over 20 years, and I didn't always see him exactly at the same intervals. Yeah. But my joke I make, it's like an oil change. You can go to Jiffy Lube. When your car needs its oil change, you got to get the oil change, or the engine can get all mucked up. I view coaching that way, and I'm a big believer too. Talk a little bit more about it though. Anything. And
I think having the right coach. So I was really lucky to have an amazing coach. What I gained most from it was what on my team needed to be changed, and also where I could grow, where I was not seeing that. And then having that accountability was huge for me. A lot of people in sales, depending on what capacity you're in, you're self-starters, you're doing it on your own. To have someone checking in on you, pushes you more.
Accountability is a weird one, everybody. It starts with you.
Yeah.
Having somebody that, even if they're holding you accountable, it's still ultimately at the end of the day, you holding yourself accountable and them just being the reminder.
That's correct.
That's the way I view it.
I totally agree.
Because that wonderful coach that says, hey, you didn't do it, he still can't come and do it for you.
That is so true. But that is a little person on your shoulder that's like, you can push through, Oh,
I love that.
Yeah.
Especially this person that we're talking about, who I also know. I love the image of him sitting on your shoulder is pretty funny.
It's great. Yeah. That's awesome.
That's great. That's a great one.
Yeah.
So Pam, last segment, we always talk about, so it's right now February 2024. You've been doing this a long time through multiple market types.
Yeah.
None of us really, we have an election this year, so none of us really know the future of our industry here. But with that said, what are you doing right now in today's environment, in today's economy, in today's marketplace, with your stage in life and the stage of your team? What are you doing right now that you think's working the most effectively?
The one thing that I don't ever get is complacent. So this stage in my career, 23 years in, I am more in than I've ever been in. So I'm listening
Oh my God, that's
to
wonderful.
podcasts, I'm reading
Hold
books.
on. You're on a podcast.
I'm on a podcast. Being coached, I am constantly learning, involving. I'm looking at the market for where it's going to shift to, and that what we were doing last year is going to be a lot different than this year. So I feel like I'm in a real growth mode. Because it's going to be a different year. Thinking about hiring, another person to add to my team strategically and slowly. Yeah, and just continuing to improve. Just really being analyzing myself on a daily basis. Don't waste time on that. Be more efficient here. How can we cut back on this? So I think just really analyzing.
There's one thing, actually I want to cut you off for a second. One thing we didn't bring up, you have a younger child.
Yes.
Not that we need, no, but I think it's important contextually when we're talking about today.
Yes.
You've got a busy life.
Oh,
You've got, how old's your younger one?
2.5 going on 16 and a half.
That's funny, but you're busy. My point is this woman, this super successful woman that you're giving us so much great info. You've got a really busy personal life. So juggling and staying in the moment and everything you're doing has to be a challenge sometimes.
Yeah, so that's one thing that I'm also always looking at is where can I leverage? So as a mom, there are things that you just have to be comfortable leveraging, having good support, having a good team at home.
Amen.
Is huge. So, adding in the right places, but having that work-life balance is also something that you have to make sure you're keeping in mind as well.
I think that's crucial. Reminding yourself to never let either side get too far. Even though you're driven and want to be successful, you still can't let that one get here and keep this one here, or it won't work long term.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, look, Pam, this has been great. You are clearly crushing it, continuing to crush it. You gave us so many good nuggets. I can't thank you enough. What as like a conclusion, what else, what would you say to anybody out there right now? Let's ask two questions. What would you say to anybody else starting out in business? Let's go with that one. What would you say to anybody starting out in business right now, knowing what you know?
Do all the things, read the books, listen to the podcasts, don't get complacent. Even when you've been doing it and have had success, you got to keep that up. Keep all that stuff up. Yeah.
Never stop. Grit and grind, like you said at the beginning.
Yeah.
And what would you say to somebody that's mid-career and rolling? I'm going to end with this question. How do you stay sharp? How do you not allow yourself to become complacent? I guess that's the best way to end with. How do you not let yourself become complacent?
I think I've continued to find inspiration in different ways, whether it's keeping your mind right by taking care of yourself, being health conscious, mixed with keeping the activity high, the discipline, so that you find the wins. And once you find the wins, I think that propels most people. I know I am that way, so if I'm getting into a rut, increase the activity, you'll have a win, and that I think will continue to propel.
But mind, body,
yes,
discipline, all of it, balance with work life, all of it together is kind of the big deal for anybody mid-career or any stage in their career.
The whole pie. Yep, that's right.
The whole pie. That's a good one. Well, thank you so much, my dear.
I
love having you here. You crushed it. You did crush it. You crushed it in business. You crushed it here. This has been awesome.
Thanks for
everybody.
Having me.
Check Pam out. She's wonderful to work with. What you see is what you get. None of this is fabricated. Pam lives this way, and she's an inspiration to me, and I appreciate you so much.
Likewise.
But check us out. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and give us a listen, give us a like, whatever. We're always here.